Good evening. This is Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Good evening to you.
And I'll be your co-host, Tikshirult. Today's topics are on the Chinese foreign minister's visit to Mongolia, the visit by the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, also to Mongolia, and the state of the Eg River Hydropower plant. So busy week in Mongolia.
Very much so.
So at the invitation of the Minister of Foreign Relations, Ms. Batzik, China's State Councilor and Minister of Foreign Affairs Wang Yi arrived in Ulaanbaatar to pay an official visit between the dates of August 7th and August 8th. What stands out from this trip is that it came directly after the visit by Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan last week, and during the visit, the foreign ministers held official talks and discussed the issues regarding Mongolia-China comprehensive strategic partnership. This included, the stimulation of economic cooperation, the intensification of construction projects and their implementation, and the increase of export of mining products, as well as the expansion of operation at border checkpoints. In addition, the parties from both countries exchanged views on the international and regional issues of mutual interests. The main issues discussed during the Chinese foreign minister's visit included the final settlements of the Irtenburg hydropower plant, which we discussed maybe 2 weeks ago, and the Barnor power plant, as well as signing agreements related to border ports between Mongolia and China. In addition, Mr. Wang thanked Mongolia for continuing to uphold the One China policy during a time of hostility with Taiwan and the U.S. Minister Wang visited Mongolia back in 2020 to strengthen bilateral cooperation and relations. So that was the last time that he visited. And what were your impressions on the visit? Do you think that it was productive? What came out of this specific visit?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that Mongolia has a foreign policy called Third Neighbors Policy. It looks like this policy works. That's why recently we have visited foreign ministers of Russia, Poland, Chinese, Japan, almost back to back. As far as Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visit, I will take it into three parts. One is, first of all, Mongolia and China have comprehensive strategic partnership. And Mr. Wang Yi visited, also called a courtesy visit to President, the Speaker, and Prime Minister of Mongolia. There were other meetings, but I would like to highlight it into three pieces. One, on politics. First of all, they have the two parties reaffirmed their mutual respect for the sovereignty, independence, and the territorial integrity. Mongolia supports One China policy. Second, they agreed to continue high-level visits, and the president of Mongolia was invited by Chinese President Xi Jinping. The third, Mongolian students study in China, which recently become more virtual because of the pandemic. Now they asked to have them in a classroom in their Chinese auditorium. There are about 10,000 Mongolian students studying in China, according to Minister of Education of China statistics. What happened on economy? Mongolia and China had achieved in 2021 $10 billion of trade turnover, and they promised to continue that landmark. Second, China will buy on consistent basis Mongolian coal, and from Chinese ocean port to Mongolia, there will be frequent, also constant basis trains every day. These are two important commitments, I believe, because Mongolia is completely dependent on our export to China of coal in particular. The third thing was about the billion of trees, national movement. They have talked in particular with the president in details because it's also a green development issue, and China has done it, and China has a lot of experiences. And I understand with this visit, the billion trees project will be more realistic. The other thing we should mention that these infrastructure projects, including construction of housing complexes in Gir area of Ulaanbaatar, water treatment facilities, and meat processing plants. The other thing was the more frequency of flights between two countries, which meaning more tourists in between two countries. And as you have mentioned, finally, is about the Bureng hydropower plant construction, which will start. Two sides confirmed that they will start shortly, which was delayed, by the way, because of a letter of Baghead under Sumo, another administrative unit. Baghead of one Sumon had sent a letter to Xi Jinping through Chinese embassy asking not to finance the project, which will take land for many herdsmen. Because of this, this project took another 2 years, so finally it will be started. My third point is about the cross-border issues. They have agreed about the stable exploration of mining products, and by connecting, they agreed to have export of coal and other mining products by connecting border ports with railway and new gateway. Railways connecting points are finalized at very important border point, Gashun Sukhait and Gansmot, which brings products from Tawan Talgoy mine, or coal mine, and Oyu Talgoy copper mine. The last one, they have agreed to further increase cooperation on border, hygiene, and quarantine issues. These are very short about all these agreements, memorandum of understandings signed by Chinese side, Minister Wang Yi. That's my short brief about this visit.
Recently, we've been gathering a lot of attention from foreign leaders. You know, we've had the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, visit. You also mentioned the Polish Foreign Minister, Japanese, and our Prime Minister, Mr. Oyunirtan, was invited to discuss partnership in Singapore. And now this week we've had a visit by the Chinese Foreign Minister. So this summer has been very, very busy in terms of diplomacy. So would you say that this is a routine round of diplomatic visits, or is Mongolia becoming a bigger player in world politics?
As Mr. Guterres said, Mongolia is a symbol of peace. And our foreign policy at this time, when our two neighbors are involved in conflicts, the very visits of so many foreign high-level dignitaries also mean that they give importance to our foreign policy, and Mongolia is and always will be, I hope, will be a land and island of democracy, and will be a good place for any talk that makes better our world to live better place.
So another person that visited Mongolia this week was the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres. He commended Mongolia's stance on nuclear power as a non-nuclear country, and thanked the President for upholding peace around the world. He thanked our armed forces, as we have some of the highest amounts of peacekeepers per capita in the world. And Mr. Guterres met with President Hurutsukh and discussed the geopolitical situation in Mongolia, the challenges that Mongolia faces as a landlocked country, and national efforts to tackle climate change. As a part of that, Mr. Guterres commended Mongolia's 1 billion trees initiative and he even planted a tree himself. And this visit was the first visit by a Secretary General of the United Nations to Mongolia since 2009, so after 13 years. What does a visit by a Secretary General of the United Nations mean, as it's something that doesn't happen all that often?
Very important. August 18th and 11th, the dates. These are dates that General Secretary of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, had visited Mongolia. It was an official visit at the invitation of Mongolian President Huritsuk. As you said, it's the 5th Secretary General visit to Mongolia. So it always, for such a small country like Mongolia, leaves important works for the history of the country and also for the development of the country. Mongolia is a member of the United Nations since 1961, and UN played, as our president highlighted very much, played an important role in social and economic development of Mongolia. We should not forget that. And Guterres said, as I said, a symbol of peace. Mongolia is a symbol of a peace, and Mongolia had and has been playing an important role and big contribution in peacekeeping process in the world, as you said also. And UN supports in the areas of peace, human rights, and sustainable development Mongolia and its all members. So I will classify this visit, many meetings, but into the 3 pieces. One is about peace and security issues. The visit coincided with 2 important events for Mongolia. It's both contributing to strengthening international peace and security. The first one is the 20th anniversary of the first deployment of Mongolian peacekeepers to UN. And Mongolia also supports the number of female personnel participating in the peacekeeping, and we will reach 15% threshold by 2027 among the peacekeepers. There will be 15% female peacekeepers. Second anniversary was the 30th anniversary of Mongolia's declaration of its territory as a nuclear weapon-free zone. 30th anniversary. In 1992, Mongolia declared its territory as a nuclear weapon-free zone. In December 2021, Mongolia had acceded to the treaty on the prohibition of the nuclear weapons. The third issue would be here, the UB dialogue since 2013 in order to maintain security, trust in Northeast Asia and a peaceful solution of the Korean Peninsula. These are 3 important events Mongolia contributed towards peace and stability in the region. About the second part of my take is Mongolia and UN development cooperation. According to the Guterres, Mongolia will closely cooperate with the UN in the areas of key priorities: human development and well-being, green, inclusive, and sustainable growth, and people-centered governance, the rule of law, and human rights within the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for Mongolia 2023 to 2027. The government signed this with the UN the agreement in May 2022. The other thing is Mongolia had initiated and established the international think tank for landlocked developing countries. In cooperation with the United Nations, there are 32 countries in the world landlocked, but need to learn from each other about how to behave with those countries who are standing in between ocean and that country. So it is Knowledge and Innovation Center, and this center it was founded and opened by Mr. Ban Ki-moon in 2009 during his visit, and this organization has UN status, UN observer status, and it's intergovernmental organization, and we hope it will be very much helpful for every of 32 countries to solve the problem connected with logistics. The other thing was UN support will play an important role to achieve the goals of our country to reform our education system, become a digital nation, and make renewable energy the main energy supply. Mongolia plays an important role ensuring peace and security in the region, which is clearly shown also in Ulaanbaatar dialogue, as I have mentioned earlier. The third part I would like to highlight is climate change issues. And it was a part of it under this Billion Tree program, and Mr. Guterres had himself planted a tree. Mongolian food security has been affected by many years of drought, and about 77% of our total territory has been affected by desertification. So we need to fight it. How? We need first to about the program, 1 billion trees. Second, implementation of sustainable management of our natural resources. The third is use the large renewable energy resources, which is enough not only to cover Mongolian needs, also we will be able to export it. So these are three questions, three areas I would highlight about this visit. And finally, we had a chance, Defacto program had a chance to ask him several questions on this regard.
Well, I think first of all, Mongolia has, of course, two neighbors, and Mongolia has maintained a very effective foreign policy and relationship with its neighbors. But Mongolia is a projection that goes far beyond. I mean, your initiative on security in Northeast Asia shows how much Mongolia projects itself. And Mongolia is a country strongly involved in peacekeeping. Mongolia is a country strongly involved in the global efforts in favor of landlocked countries. Women, peace and security is another aspect. So Mongolia is not isolated. Mongolia is part of the international community, and that is the best way to protect Mongolia's interests. On the other hand, I've noticed the government has a number of intentions in relation to the development of the country in order to make the country more self-sufficient in a number of key areas, energy and others, and also in relation to a very active presence in the international organizations, with what I would say will give Mongolia a bigger resilience and a bigger capacity to face the enormous challenges that developing countries are facing at the present moment. And we also discussed the need for middle-income countries like Mongolia that have vulnerabilities, namely in relation to climate change, to have a much stronger support of the international community, namely international financial institutions, in relation to concessional funding and in relation to debt relief. Well, first of all, Mongolia has been, as I mentioned, very influent in relation to different peace initiatives, namely in the context of Northeast Asia. But the most important contribution of Mongolia to the UN has been peacekeeping. Mongolian peacekeepers are exemplary. They are resilient, they are courageous, and they are totally committed to protect the civilians. The fact Mongolia is a democracy committed to human rights helps in the extraordinary performance of Mongolian peacekeepers. But now we want to have I would say, go an extra mile in our relations with Mongolia. We want to deepen the cooperation, deepen the consultations in relation to political initiatives, especially for peace, and to be much more engaged in support of Mongolia in the implementation of your Vision 2050 and in the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, first of all, we have an enormous admiration for Mongolia's initiative. In a world where we have dramatic geopolitical tensions, and in a region where the tensions are themselves very high, Mongolia represents a symbol of wisdom, a symbol of dialogue, and a symbol of the promotion of peace. So all your efforts in relation to the security of Northeast Asia are very much welcomed by us. We consider that they are practically the only game in town in relation to pursue an agenda for peace, and we are ready to do everything to strengthen the impact of Mongolia's initiatives.
Let's move on to our third and final topic of the week. Eg River, or Eg in Mongolian, is a river that gets its outflow from Lake Hosul and flows into the Sidling River, and it eventually flows into Lake Baikal or Lake Beryl. The Eg project is a hydropower project which was announced in 1991 to generate more power for the central region. But up until now, it still hasn't really started. So why is that?
Well, first of all, why we put this project in particular in the focus of this week? Because this project will depend also on, connected with these two visits, Chinese Foreign Minister and UN General Secretary. Why? Hydropower plant on this river, Eg, will be financed, the project will be financed by China, and it needs UN particular support because this project is to do with the Russian claim on negative impact on Baikal Lake. So let's go one by one. First, the government of Mongolia had decided to make this hydropower plant 31 years ago in 1991. Since that, there were 2 or 3 times attempts, and finally in 2016, the government had even started to construct the plant. But there became problem because Russia had complained to UNESCO World Heritage Committee that if this Mongolian plant comes into existence, then it will have a big impact on the intake of Baikal Lake, and it will cause several dangerous things to water supply of the lake and to the security of people living along the Sidling River in the Russian side. Meanwhile, Mongolian Academy of Science made independent study of that issue, and concluded that it is not the case. But the Russians were not buying it. But the most interesting thing was recently, at the recent visit by the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, said, first time, the Russian government, he said, the government of Russia is not against the project. That means Russia is not against the project. That was the statement was made according to the Prime Minister of Mongolia, Oyun-Yildiz, who had recently visited the site just before Guterres' visit to Mongolia. Why? Because if UNESCO, the next year meeting of World Heritage Committee, if they will discuss the issue again, and by that time we hope there will be an independent third-party analysis of the situation of the plant impact on the nature, which is carried out now by a French company after tender bidding, and if this report is coming this report is supposed to come by the end of October this year, and that committee, World Heritage Fund Committee, will have a meeting next year. At that meeting, if the project has no negative impact on the nature, including Baikal Lake, then the UN will change their decisions. And Mr. Guterres had also promised that if project is positive, the study is positive, then UN will support it. And plus, he said, developing nations should not be dependent on energy. That's what his statement, very encouraging statement. And Mongolians are keen to really develop that project with certain reason. One, with hydropower plants, one can regulate your power grid, because with the coal turbine, you cannot stop that turbine when you don't need it. With hydropower plant, you can regulate it. One. Secondly, Mongolia is spending around $170 million at the current rate every year for importing energy from Russia. So this money will stay in the country. The third, renewable energy projects are easily supported or financed rather than the coal-based projects. So, plus this one will be financed by Chinese soft loan. With this hydropower plant construction, Mongolia will have large new lake, which will be a substantial contribution towards development of tourism in that area.
So you've said that Mongolia spends $170 million every year for power, for export. How much money would we save after the construction of the Eg River Hydropower plant?
You know, we talked earlier about Irtin Bulgam hydropower plant, and this Iginkol is 3 times larger by capacity. So Mongolia will be really sustainable with our energy supply, and after minus the cost coming to the loan, etc., and I think at least $100 or so million economy, we will prevent that amount of money coming out of the country, along with the other benefits I have just now described. So it's really crucial, and we really wait for that report, the independent study by a French company.
That is all for this week. This has been Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Thank you very much for watching us. You can see this and the previous, all our Defacto weekly review. You can see on our website, jargaldefacto.com, and leave there your comments and questions. Thank you very much.